Church of England, music entrepreneur.
Hello and welcome to the Mark and Pete Show. The Church of England has turned to the music industry to find its next profit. That is financial profit and not a person proclaiming the will of God, although you never know. Yes, it seems bizarre, but the church is one of hundreds of investors in a company called Hipgnosis. And this has been something which is essentially into back catalogues. Artists such as Mark Ronson, Chic, Barry Manilow, Blondie, and many, many others are some of the artists that have sold their back catalogues, and the Church of England is now turning to be very entrepreneurial. Good times, you might say. Well, this is all about the charm of church in chime. Yes, hells, bells, and bellowing business blues. The church is chiming and making music news. Christ the Son is number one and going for a song. Back catalogue kings as a till rings, profiting all day long. Cool school, God rule, he's just begun to croon. So ding dong, dance along, the devil is out of tune. Well, finally, Clergyman Pete, we've got some good news here. Yes, the church is being entrepreneurial.
Wow.
I do ask you, what other ventures would the Church of England consider branching out into?
Yes, interesting, isn't it? The Church of England has this body called the Church Commissioners, which are responsible for doing investment. They hold the money which is used to pay the clergy stipends, including my pay as a vicar, and they make investments. Famously in the 80s, they made some investments on the stock market and lost a bit of money, I think, in property as well. But they made that back. They made some canny investments. They're quite careful with their money. They own a lot of the property. For example, a lot of the vicarages and houses are owned by the Church of England Church Commissioners. And so they're used to investment. Investment in music, investment in, different forms of investment that will give a yield, but they are committed, they say, to investing ethically. They they hold equities, they invest in property still, but they also have what they refer to, the Church Commissioners refer to as a diversified portfolio, can I just read to you what they say, because this makes a lot of sense. This is their diverse portfolio includes multi-asset and credit strategies, timberland and infrastructure. There you go.
Well, yes, I must admit.
Thank you for being so clear about what you do with your money, Church of England. Thank you.
Yes, it does remind me of that Spitting Image sketch where, admittedly, it was over the Pope, where the Pope is running around the balcony and he's getting all panicky, saying, he's here, and it's Jesus Christ who's going to want to see the books.
Yes. Look busy, the boss is here. Yes, it is a bit like that. Yeah, they're covering themselves a little bit. They're writing in a way to try and show that they're being careful with the money. As to whether they are, I don't know, but they seem to have quite a lot of money. So they're obviously doing something right or wrong, depending on how you look at it.
Well, it seems to be chiming well from the point of view of profit. Now, the reason that they've probably done this, and just incidentally, they're not the only investors. There are big financial companies, insurance companies, and many other organizations have chosen to look at the music industry. And why? Well, from a business perspective, this is how it works. Typically, all artists who normally will have rights to their songs and back catalogues would make a decision as to whether they feel that they should sell on. There's an opportunity there to make more money. But the reason people would do this is that they could possibly use those songs for advertising, and we've seen many a song reworked to sell a product. But also, it's the revenue that's gained from constant airplays on radio stations throughout the world, and this ramps up to a lot of money. There are many other things that can be used for public events, but essentially the Church of England has decided to do this I think it's a good idea, and I'm going to take it one step further, slightly shifting away from the music industry and proposing this to you, Clergyman Pete. The clergymen that you have probably seen with doors being closed due to COVID-19 is something that we're often familiar with. So the Church of England does need to look at other ventures. You mentioned about the property, and I think they've had some mixed experiences with that, as you've already alluded to. Yeah. I was thinking perhaps they could go in a slightly different direction to help to promote their cause, but also to invest in communities. And what I'm suggesting is maybe they could take some of their funds and think about investing in local businesses. Now, that could be of all natures. So essentially, are certainly going to want backers, as banks are struggling as well in terms of lending money to people. Church of England does have cash, as you've already highlighted, but I think what they could do is invest in small tech companies, service companies, manufacturing companies, who could really do with that support. But perhaps here's the one difference, and that is to be able to also follow through the moral principles of business practices. We've seen in the 20th century and also the 21st century, many people perhaps not always practicing things in the right way. We've seen businesses go for short profits, short-termism. We are very much against that. We're very much in for long-termism. And investing in people is going to be very, very important. We're seeing a lot of young people who perhaps have been described as the forgotten generation. This would be a great opportunity, I think. Yes. So what's your thoughts then? Maybe that perhaps the Church of England has an opportunity at last to really make a difference in the community.
Well, I think so. And this is already being done on a small scale and not really very well coordinated. And if it were coordinated, of course, with all the resources available to the Church of England, you could end up having quite a lot of investment available for people to start up new businesses. But even at a local level, in my church, my churches, I'm vicar of 3 churches. In 2 of them, there is a business running in them. One is a social supermarket, and one is a coffee bar that's turned into a cafe serving meals. Hence, it can be open now during the restrictions due to COVID. You have to serve. Only serve drinks with a meal, and so these are small businesses which employ local people, so including in management levels. So that's the sort of thing that I know other vicars do something similar. I'm not alone in that, but you can just imagine what you could do. And I'm just going to give one example of something I still hope to do, but it's been put on the back burner. That's not quite the right word, but it's been delayed for a bit. Partly due to the COVID-19 epidemic, but also before that, various things changing in the neighbourhood where I am. Basically, there's going to be a lot of building work done soon. But I was looking. We live next to the Mersey. Why not use a few different experts? I know someone who makes moulds for boats, so presses the boat out of some sort of fiberglass material. I know someone who has a building next to the river. Why not have a little business making boats? To sail about with on the river. You could even have your a Merseyside boat race, like in China they have these Dragon Festival boat races. They could have a Mersey boat race, ferry cross the Mersey boat race, something like that. So that's the sort of thing.
Yes.
A little bit of investment using people's local knowledge. That particular venture may not happen, but something like that, using local knowledge, ingenuity, entrepreneurship, that would help local people. But I would go further than that and say this is part of what the church is about, because if the church has businesses as part of what it does, it can be self-supporting even in a poor area.
Yes. Well, the funny thing is that many people are crying out for those local investments, and
Sure.
the government, ironically, has said that it wants to obviously nurture industry. We're in a situation where, folks, yes, the dare I say the Brexit situation has sort of stumbled. We're not looking like we're going to get a deal with the EU. Now, some people will think that's a good thing, but either way, what we do need, though, is to boost the economy. And
Yes.
that's
Just so,
something.
I mean, what we're saying is, yes, some people, and I think we would say that it's a good thing in the long term. In the short term, this is not good for business because of all the disruption that's going to be caused
Oh, yes.
by
Yeah,
Brexit.
exactly. But I think that the church has a different approach, and it always has taken a different approach as well. And I think being entrepreneurial is a good idea. We just want ideas to pour through, but having an institute, I use that in the broadest sense, that can be, first of all, national, but also global in its outreach, can have influence at a local level, but also at an international level.
Yes.
So I think the church has, as many people have pointed out, has often been criticised for losing its way. I encourage the Church of England to be entrepreneurial. Now, some people might say this is too much risk-taking, it's deviating from their core principles and what they're really doing. I disagree. I think that if we look back in history, Church of England has been involved in businesses for many centuries.
You're quite right. I mean, in fact, you could say that the parish system, whereby the entire country of England, at any rate, is divided into parishes. You've got a church in each parish. It was set up in that way to divide up the land. And for many churches, the money used to pay the vicar as well as maintain the building came from using the land mainly as farmland, but also renting it out. So that has long been the case, that the church was the centre of trade and business in its parish, and was where people would meet to discuss such things. I suppose the equivalent of the council meeting, the parish council, the parish council meeting, the PCC, parish church council meeting. Well, that was a meeting that would talk about all events, not just church events, as they often do now. So, it's not really departing from what the Church of England has historically done. We just trying to, if the Church of England were to take the Mark and Pete approach and be more entrepreneurial, perhaps with the church commissioners putting together a small group to look at how they can help local churches invest in their local community, not with just sort of advice, but with putting perhaps a small grant, or better, I think, sort of a micro loan, a small loan that they can pay back if and when the business becomes successful.
Well, I think there's an opportunity here to combine talent, because I know that some people who are probably listening to this were thinking, hold on, church leaders are great at evangelizing the word of God, but they're not necessarily always good at running a business.
Absolutely,
well, there may be some element of that, of course, but here's my suggestion. Why not get local entrepreneurs to work with church leaders, come together and build the plan, and that, I think, is then going to not only unite the communities, but potentially will invest in the local talent. It could possibly boost industry in those particular communities throughout the country and potentially beyond. But I think that what everybody's looking to is something beyond just pure government. Because what we don't necessarily need to go political here, but I think that government can have its place, but it needs other stakeholders who have outreach, and the Church of England definitely has outreach. So I think there's a golden opportunity there. Now, Clergyman Pete, I wanted to mention here that as we sort of draw this show to a close, this idea of investing in music is not actually unique, because if we sort of take a step back, and I'm going back into the 90s. Now, David Bowie, who we know sadly is no longer alive, but actually was one of the first artists to look at future earnings. This is essentially the idea of investing an artist, where you sell your back catalogues and your securities, but at the same time, you're forward-looking. They were called Bowie bonds at the time, and essentially was awarding investors a share of any royalties of the songs from what either happened in the past, but also potentially what could also happen in the future. Now, I was thinking here, Clergyman Peter, we know a song about, bearing in mind Christmas is coming up, it's not that far away. How about a little song which just sort of evangelizes this whole idea of how the church could raise...
I think we should do it, especially as we, as great musical artists, are looking for investment, folks.
Absolutely.
If you've got some spare cash, brother, can you spare a dime?
Folks, why not log on to markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts on this subject? So, as we
give us your money,
with this,
not really,
with this with this wonderful subject, and we certainly look forward to talking to you about future topical topics. Here's a little closeout from Mark and Pete. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the rock and roll king. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and investors reconciled. Joyful, ye prophets, rise, join the triumph of pop prize. With the angelic host proclaim, Christ is a hit, and with fame. Hark, the herald angels sing, glory to every guitar string.